Hi guys, good evening and welcome back once again to the EdWord. I'm your host Eddie, and in tonight's video I will be giving you my spoiler-filled thoughts and review on the latest outing from the Godzilla franchise. Not the legendary Warner Brothers Monsterverse, but rather the original OGs themselves, the Toho Studios' latest film to grace us, called Godzilla Minus One. And it was great. So good. Before I get into all of that, please be warned, this is a spoiler-filled review, like I mentioned earlier. So if you plan on watching Godzilla Minus One opening weekend, this coming weekend, you don't want to keep watching or listening to this video, as I will be discussing spoilers, plot details, character stuff, all that jazz. That being said, you have been warned. Let's dive right back into it. First and foremost, this was a good, healthy balance of a Godzilla story and a very human-driven story. You know, our main character is a guy who couldn't quite bring himself to become a kamikaze pilot, because let's not be too harsh on him, the guy didn't want to die, and survived World War II, survived the bombings of Japan, but carried that guilt with him that it was indirectly his fault that a number of men were killed by Godzilla during Godzilla's first scene earlier in the film. And he was clearly stricken with PTSD. And it felt like Godzilla in this movie was the role of the antagonist. He was the bad guy. And I usually prefer and enjoy movies where he's the hero and he's saving and protecting Tokyo or humanity from other monsters. But in this case, there were no other monsters. It was just him, and for whatever reason, he was attacking Tokyo, like he does. But it felt like Godzilla was a metaphor for PTSD, or at least for trauma. And in this case, it was for, we had our lead character who was clearly traumatized and living with that guilt and his PTSD. But it also felt like Godzilla was the collective trauma of Japan as a result of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki towards the end of World War II. And Godzilla, the franchise, was born out of the atomic age. You know, once the atom bombs dropped, a few years later came the first Godzilla movie, released in 1954, which is what this movie reminded me of so much. So much. I don't know if this is supposed to be a remake of that or not. I don't think it is. It had similar plot details and elements, but it was very nostalgic and reminded me of Godzilla 54, which I really enjoyed as well, obviously. So it felt like Godzilla in this film was a great metaphor for trauma or PTSD, one or the other. And in this case, it was the trauma that was left on the Japanese people. Because despite that happening almost 80 years ago, I'm sure the residual effects are still felt and talked about to this day and age. So I thought that was a clever usage of Godzilla. You know, a great way to express or let the world know, hey, we're still dealing with the fallout from this, literally, the radioactive fallout. So I liked that, and then I felt like the movie really balanced itself well between stuff going on with our human characters and then the exciting Godzilla attack action sequences as well. Like, all the Godzilla scenes were super solid, very exciting, very satisfying. I loved hearing that iconic theme song. Dun 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 dun. Dung, do 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 do, and then of course the classic iconic roar that was ever so slightly remixed a little bit, but that's okay because it was loud and scary. And oh my God, speaking of scary, how about the regenerating of the flesh ability? That was new and awesome. And speaking of awesome, I loved how when he was getting ready to fire up his atomic heat breath, his dorsals would pop up all along his back. Lit up, of course, ready to show everyone nearby, hey, I'm about to spew out my fire breath, and sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And speaking of which, I gotta say, I'm surprised the main, not necessarily the love interest, but we can call her that, Naroki, I think her name was, Naroki, survived, lost an eye, obviously, when we saw her at the end of the movie, but survived that atomic heat blast that Godzilla spewed on Tokyo. And, or no, was that Ginza? That might have been Ginza, not Tokyo. Yeah, I think that was Ginza. I couldn't believe she survived. I'm like, oh, this is a pleasant surprise. I was hoping our main pilot would survive, which he did, reunite with his adopted little girl, and then it turns out, oh, his love interest survived as well. Excellent. And now he can begin to heal now that he redeemed himself by taking down Godzilla, delivering the fatal blow, which was awesome, by the way his head just blew up and then he literally crumbles apart and falls into the ocean. Just a solid Godzilla film. Great human characters too. Like the whole boat crew that the pilot joins up to detonate leftover mines from the war. What a great group of characters they were. They were funny, they were heartfelt, they were engaging, and everybody did a great job in their respective roles. And Godzilla looked and sounded phenomenal. He was huge, he was scary, destructive as hell. Again, I usually prefer him in the more heroic roles, but this movie also made me feel super nostalgic for those early Godzilla films where he was mostly the bad guy attacking Japan or attacking Tokyo. So I still liked that quite a bit. And I liked this movie a lot. It was a huge improvement over the last Toho Godzilla film we got a few years ago, which I did not care for, Shin Gojira from 2016. The one where he was like a giant floppy worm or slug or something. And then he just looked weird too. I was not a fan of that film. I don't think a lot of people were, but I particularly wasn't. This movie made up for that and improved that significantly. So I am grateful that we got a recent, very well done Toho Godzilla film, and it's got me all the more excited for the completely unrelated next Godzilla film, Godzilla and Kong, The New Empire. Hopefully we'll get a trailer soon because we've been getting some new teaser posters lately, and it looks pretty awesome. It looks pretty awesome, so I'm excited about that. But overall, I enjoyed this movie. I hope you guys did too. What did you all think of it? I'd love to hear your thoughts and feelings on it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your night. Godzilla Minus One is now playing for a limited time in theaters. Check your local times for tickets and availability. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks again for watching. And of course, until next time, may the force be with you.